Okay, let's go. Welcome to another edition of Exo on the Couch. Today, Rob Wijaya, the Director of Exo Digital, is joining me. My name's David Shepherd. I'm the Client Engagement Director at Exo Digital, and we're on the couch again for a rant or a rave. So welcome, Rob. Just tell
Thank
us
you.
a little bit about yourself by way of introduction.
Sure. Thank you very much, David. Yeah, my name is Rob, the director at Exo Digital. About myself. I got introduced to technology and internet at a very young age and fell in love with it right there and then. So back in the day, built chatbots and Flash website when I was 11. Fast forward, with the career, I've worked across SMEs to large corporates in the past 18 years. Designing and developing website apps and games.
Wow, since you're 11, you've been involved in design. That's amazing.
Yeah. There's definitely a different story how I got introduced, obviously from my brother, but we can discuss about that on the next round.
Great. So do you have a rant or a rave for us today?
Yeah. So I might go with definitely a rave. I've just been, it's that time of the year. I would like to reflect, obviously, in this year. Essentially, it's been a tough year, essentially, but I think, from where we stand today, I would like to rave about the recent team growth that we have at EXO. And also, especially the way how we've been able to adapt in this real challenging time and how effectively we have been able to work together with the remote working situation pretty much, and by using agile sprint.
Great. So what is agile, and how does the sprint fit into that framework?
Yeah, so agile is a method or a process, along with the principle and mindset with it, is a way how we together as a team are able to pretty much deliver a project in an iterative manner, pretty much. And on the contrary to that, I should mention we have a different workflow, which we call a waterfall model, pretty much, and where that is more linear and more sequential and more fixed in terms of a scope.
Yes, and with the way that agile is used in EXO, we've got 2 week sprints set up. Can you tell us a little bit about how you set up the sprints and the process of working through the 2 weeks?
Yes, totally. So any other company you would typically see agile sprint run in 2 to 3 weeks to 4 weeks. I don't see any agile sprints run beyond that. Essentially, the key to running agile sprint is actually about sizable story or momentum that's created within that sprint. So there's when I call story is actually task that each members actually get to commit in that sprint. And the way how we run sprints is a 2 weekly sprint. It starts with a sprint planning, and with that sprint planning, we typically ask everyone in the team. I set the priority, and for yourself as well, David, if there is any project coming in our way, essentially, that's a time for us to be able to just set the scene for the team. And at the same time, also we've got I guess the sprint from before, whether there was any carryover. But starting a sprint, with that sprint planning, the whole goal is essentially committing the whole task for that 2 weekly sprint, and followed by the sprint refinement in the middle of the sprint, which is the second Monday. And with that Monday, we are sort of checking in with the team. How is everyone going? Are they feeling comfortable with the sprint? Is there anything that we need to change, essentially? And following to that, by the end of the sprint is the retrospective, pretty much, where we look back to sort of ask the question what works and what doesn't work.
Sure. Now we have daily check-ins as well. Is daily check-in a part of the process? Could you skip that, or do you have to do your daily check-ins?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can skip that. I think daily check-ins, why we call it that for starter, in any agile environment, they call them stand-up. I mean, we can't really stand up virtually. So that's why we have check-ins. check-ins in itself is a very good mechanism as a product owner or anyone who's managing that project to get a sense of what everyone is doing and identifying blockers, essentially. At the end of the day, it's actually about building momentum of the team, making sure, as a leader of the team, we are able to, our job is essentially to unblock and enable, everyone's job to work smoothly, pretty much. That's pretty much what the check-in is for.
So when we've identified blockers, we've quite often sort of everything has pivoted around maybe a workshop or some sort of other engagement. Is that normal as part of the process to do that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when we identify blockers, it could be either, the blocker is actually dependencies on a person. The other blocker is actually because of the unknowns, right? And I think that's the beauty of Agile in its core, pretty much. When we have waterfall model where it is quite fixed and sequential, the story then becomes, hey, we are going to deliver this project. It's a 6 to 12 month project. We're just going to do it, whichever way we hit it, it's going to be the same solution towards the end. And I think the beauty of Agile is pretty much around us having a common vision and mission as a team. And for example, just giving you a bit of a context here, the difference between Waterfall and Agile is the whole mission with Agile is how might we increase engagement online, right? So that's the big sort of how might we statement. And in Waterfall, I think it is quite rare to actually find that sort of a big mission in some way. Going back to the history, probably worth mentioning about this, a bit of a story about my background. I came from a very heavy advertising background back in the golden age of advertising. Should mention the two major workflow there that they had was, and still probably is until today, was the pitching and the delivery, right? The way how they run it, essentially, from account team down to the practitioners. I was the designer and developer back in the day. So what's happening, there were a lot of assumptions that were made creating that pitch or the delivery. So what's happening in terms of the mindset that they have, essentially, and also the project management point of view, it was around us making the best that we could from our expertise and instinct. And at the same time, also when we actually go to this proposal and pitch, the common thing that we're missing were data and insights, essentially. And the problem with that were, we found it really, really hard to be able to change our direction. And typically when the waterfall project was quite long, then, in the middle of the say 6 months, the problem is then, how can we tell it to the customer that, there was this problem that we found out, essentially, right? So, and contrary to the Agile sprint in particular, we are able to work with the client with discovery workshops, embed this research sprint, and let them know that the deliverable is still a website. But I guess from the engagement point of view, we ask the question: what is your real core problem to this? Why has this come about? That you want to do rebrand of the website, or a replatforming. We ask those really valuable business questions to them, and from there we would be able to sort of align ourselves and do an immersive sort of workshop to be able to understand that landscape better. And out of that, essentially, we are able to come up with a plan that we are going to solve this problem. And you can see the discussion from the get-go is pretty much a really fluid and flexible conversation with the client.
Absolutely. And I think that, you mentioned that we make a lot of assumptions. And I think that within a 2-week sprint cycle, there is the opportunity then to test those assumptions through engaging with customers, because obviously, we're an innovation consultancy, but very customer centric and customer focused. So did you see that as the value of running sprint cycles, that you can do that research and change and pivot the direction of the project?
Definitely. I mean, especially with the rapid change on the market with COVID-19 now, right? I think it's really important for us as organization to be able to be nimble and lean in our approach. And instilling this mindset is really, really important for the team. It's actually, in a nutshell, it's actually about growth mindset. One could actually have a very fixed solution. Hey, this is, the only solution that we have. It's actually not that. It's actually not being attached to that problem. And one of the principles that I use is actually, our first is our worst, pretty much. So what that means is actually, us being a designer or a developer, we would like us to actually, be highly collaborative to each other, challenge that idea, is this the right way? And also embedding insights and through research, essentially. So that's the real importance of the way how we work and adapt with the market, pretty much.
Very good. And I believe that you've also had a go at Agile in your home environment, Agile for families.
That's it.
What does that look like?
Yeah, so a bit of that, I suppose. My wife actually is a pastry, so totally different role essentially, and industry. So when I first got into introduced to Agile, I was so excited to actually tell her about this, because my eyes were wide open. That this whole new way of working actually is game changing, right? So I was working with Telstra and ANZ. I see so many teams being restructured, but I think the one common thing there, not to say that the restructure was actually, it was a time of a challenge, obviously, but I think the beautiful part there was, out of reflection, was that we had a very small team. We use Agile and then, scaled it up, 10 times, 20 times, and it still really works really well. And one of the highlights that came out of that process by observing it, I suppose, was this whole mindset, right? So Agile, there was a big misconception of what Agile is. Agile is actually not just a process, not just a guides, it's actually a mindset, right? And a lot of people in the industry say, oh yeah, I've been doing Agile. I mean, a lot of them actually have done Agile for over 1 decade, 10 to 20 years, right? Not to say that they're doing something wrong, but sometimes we can be sidetracked, right? With that whole idea about falling in love with your idea, and this is the only way. And especially when the project run for so long, like 3 months, then release, or 6 months or 12 months even, that's a big risk. And then the appetite then for a lot of large organizations with large digital transformation has been, Agile is actually agility, fail fast, speed to market. And that was a whole sort of buzzwords around Agile. For me, I believe it's not only just about fail fast, speed to market. I mean, for starter, who would aim for failure, right? Sure. I mean, for me, it's always been about speed to learning and speed to applying, right? So how can we learn so fast that we can apply that to implementation? And that's the real importance of Agile in a nutshell. And you would see that a lot of team with a more mature Agile environment, they don't really stick to the the pure form of Agile. Like sometimes they could actually be more effective to running their retros, for example. It's not just I mean, Agile in itself is actually a good process when you first adopt it. You follow the step-by-step process essentially, and after we actually run really well, then we have a very common theme: how we run our workshops, how we run our meetings, how we do sprint plannings, how we write our stories, for example. And we adopt those mindsets more importantly, and that's, I think, will set a good benchmark for any team to adopt.
So what happens if within the first week of a sprint cycle, the team achieves their objectives and they want to go from sort of research into more of an implementation mode. Does that happen within that sprint cycle, or do you wait? Do you finish off all the objectives, maybe revisit them, make sure that everything is correct before you then plan for the next sprint cycle?
Yeah, so very good question there. So now we're talking about what we call program increment planning. So whilst we have a very short sprint cycle, which is a 2-weekly sprint, a quarterly planning for any organization is called program increment planning, or PI planning, they call them. So that's an ability for any team or project or company to be able to actually look ahead. What is that quarterly theme look like in terms of a mission, pretty much? And in that moment, I think this is a great discussion that I think we can discuss on another session. But I think in a high level, as designers, usually we would like to run 2 to 3 sprints ahead to be able to embed that discovery at the beginning and run in parallel with the devs, essentially, or the delivery team. So the main point here is around making sure that when we actually do the discovery phase, we are able to include the developer from that time, to be able to. I think a lot of the times this is actually combining UX, Lean, and Agile in terms of a workflow. But I think the real importance is about empowering people, and that's so apparent for Agile in terms of mindset, empowering everyone to do what they do best, pretty much. And in Agile environment, I don't think there is one person who can say I'm the best and this is the only solution that we can offer to our client or to this project. It's actually about collectively as a team. What did we find about the customer challenge, and how can we deliver and sort of respond to this problem, and what are the sort of business drivers around this, and is it actually visible for the developers as well? So those are the mix that we go and from in terms of Agile sprint in general.
That collaboration, I've noticed, is really important within sprints. And as you've mentioned before, the objective is to remove blockers so that people can do what they've said they're going to do within that 2-week cycle. So what technology do we use to assist us with that? And do you need to have technology to support that?
Yeah. Technology, yes, definitely. I mean, living in a digital age, if we say, we're not relying on technology, that's probably a bit of a nightmare because, writing on paper is a bit manual. So any large organization would typically use, Confluence Suite or Confluence and Jira, essentially. But for us, we've tried, many different tools and now resorted to ClickUp. So in there, we store all of our tasks or story or card, we call them. And from there, we pretty much plan our tasks, in that sprint planning and do the daily check-in and refinement, pretty much.
That's great. So if a client is watching this, or a potential client is watching this and wants to implement Agile and sprint cycles within their organization, how easy is it for them to do that?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. One thing I would say for sure is about getting started first. The real important, it is actually very easy to do. Without all the nitty-gritty of how you can write a story. But I think, having a two weekly sprint as starter, I think is a good start, where you set up, on the Monday, for example, it's a good day, or like starting a sprint midweek or end of the week is a bit, I guess, a bit weird.
Yeah.
Because you got the weekend, obviously, right? So, say that you start on Monday, and then just start with the commitment. Like, in these 2 weeks, what are we going to achieve as a team, right? The real importance here with Agile, the benefit is actually about building momentum and creating a story and breaking it down so small that we can hold everyone, each other actually, accountable, right? Because when the story is so clear, you are able to actually see that, like, every single item gets delivered pretty much. So
Yes.
that's the purpose of starting a sprint, essentially, building momentum and creating a highly collaborative environment for any team. And I think starting is not going to be hard. I think as you get to the sort of routine of a sprint, then you can sort of see the fruit of what you have delivered in the past, from retrospective, what did we learn. And in terms of retro, probably I should mention, the way how we do retro is a bit different to any typical retro. After delving to a lot of different projects myself, we'll probably call it retro 2.0. In any typical retro, we would have what works, what doesn't work, and a question pretty much. And we went a step further than that. The whole mindset of retro is making sure that everyone's voice is heard. Not only the loudest have got to say. So what's happening then, with what works, that's a point of celebration for us, right? So I think that's really important for us to have that celebrations of what we delivered, what works, the high five in the team. So I think that's part of a big equation of running sprint. And of something of the next process about what doesn't work is about identifying the challenges that the team faces during that 2-weekly sprint. And it's really important for any product owners or managers to be there in the room. And I definitely see myself, I'm just making sure that I am there as well, to be able to listen in, what's going on. How can we be able to adapt to the challenges? Because at the end of the day, is actually, if we're not learning anything, then we're not growing anymore, right? So that's pretty much where it's at. And the next step that we improved was the solution generations out of those things that weren't working from the last sprint. How can we generate solutions out of that? Turning it into how might we solution? Then we don't actually go to the rabbit hole of falling in love with the solution. So it's actually about spreading our wings really broad. Even some of the guys working in marketing, then the solution generated could actually be from developer, and you can see the benefits actually of having different people with different roles is really important, because many different problems can be solved differently, right? So that's the solution generations. And the last part is actually the impact and effort scale. And in there, we are able to straight away prioritize that task and assign it to people. And you can see the meeting there for the retro itself is very structured, and people actually find it really hard to get sidetracked because it's pretty much a very good structure to follow.
I've noticed that. I mean, there's great clarity in our meetings. A lot of what we need to resolve is resolved in our daily stand-ups, but those things that aren't resolved, the group that is dependent on each other for delivering that, they break off and they have their own meeting. So I find that structure is part of what the benefit is of Agile. It really does keep you focused on your objective. So thank you very much for your time today, Rob. That's all we've got time for. If you'd like to get more information on using Agile or setting up sprints within your team, we'd love to hear from you. Check us out at exodigital.com.au or give us a shout out via email on hello@exodigital.com.au or Google us and give us a call. We'd love to have a chat to you. So thank you, Rob, for that rave. I think it's a worthy source of information, Agile and sprints, and we'll see everyone next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
See you later.
See you, David.